with a best-of-5 format.
It's finally time to get this thing started, and straight away, Singapore, Quest Rogue. Many of the players were laughing at them for bringing it, but it is the first ban from Bulgaria.
It is, on both sides. And it makes a perfect amount of sense when you look at the lineups from both of these players. Very slow, very controlling. We see, I believe, Control Mage on both sides, as opposed to the Murloc Mage that we've been seeing knocking about from some of the teams. They've got Even Warlock instead of Zoo. They've got Shutterbox Shaman instead of Even Shaman. Right. Basically, every way that you can go with a class that has multiple archetypes, these players have gone control.
The order in which the games are going to take place. First up is Freaky on the Odd Warrior versus Katsukuri on Cube Warlock. And this is a really interesting matchup. Just while the previous series was going on, we were having a chat with Hunter Ace and Zorkthar about it. And we came in thinking, you know, Cube Warlock's looking pretty good here, but they were saying, no, we believe the Odd Warrior is actually quite significantly favored.
Yeah, it's just the weird spot that Cube Block is in at the moment, where I would say is primarily an anti-control deck rather. And also we saw, I believe it was Chile, had the more mech-heavy aggro version with Arcanite Reapers and War Gears thrown in there. A lot of different strategies have been gone for, and Bulgaria continuing in that grand tradition with, as you said, the Leroy thrown in there as well into their Odd Warrior, just maybe as a salute to the Pirate Warrior days as well.
It looks like we are just about getting ready to start the first game. Just to remind everyone watching, as with the whole of the Hearthstone Global Games, there is communication throughout the team, but there is one player in charge of each game. There is one pilot. That is the only player on each team allowed to even touch the mouse. They are the person that makes the final decision. If they disagree with their teammates, it's their call.
Yeah, you can call them a moron, but you are not allowed to touch that mouse.
Yep.
They have the final say, which, you know, a lot of players, it's when you have so many good players on a team, that can almost work against you in the way that you have such strong opinions bashing up against each other. If you have one clearly strongest member on the team who's calling the shots, then it can be a little bit smoother.
Right.
But we'll be interested to see how the communication works between these teams. As we can quite clearly see, to get this game rolling, Singapore keeping that skull. This is pretty much one of the primary ways that you are hoping to just win this game right at the start. You may not be winning in fatigue, but if you can pull out a couple of Void Lords, Doom Guards right at the start of the game and smork them down, you're usually in a pretty good spot.
Most important thing for the Warrior is actually to find that weapon removal to prevent the skull from doing its things. If the Warrior can prevent Doom Guards from doing anything all game, then that puts them in a great spot. They end up having to tempo out the Doom Guards to have even any shot of winning whatsoever, because if they're just letting the Void Lords die, then Gul'dan gets weaker.
And even though at the moment Bulgaria do not have access to that weapon destruction quite yet, of which we can see they are running just the one Gluttonous Ooze in their deck. Although they don't have the weapon destruction yet, they've got a good amount of removal. Even if there are Doom Guards and Void Lords pulled from their hand, Shield Slam, Super Collider, that should be doing a pretty good job, I think, of just clearing up the board, making sure they're not taking too much damage.
Nothing particularly exciting from the Discover there, but Gem-Studded Golem, it's the strongest card. It's got the biggest numbers on it. Seems good to me.
I like it a lot. I think this is a not too often acknowledged weakness of Q-Block is the single target removal. As soon as you start falling behind on board, it can actually be kind of difficult to pull it back, because against the likes of Zoo, Odd Paladin, Odd Rogue, whatever, you Hellfire, you Defile, and you've got back the board. But against an Odd Warrior, when they're playing Direhorn Matriarch, Gem-Studded Golem, Baku itself potentially, you really do start to take quite a bit of damage if you're not careful.
Katsukuri is amongst the highest scoring players when it comes to HCC this year, with a respectable 87 points. Freaky, one of the highest for Bulgaria as well. He has 40.
Right. As now the plan for Singapore, I'm sure, will be coming together with the non-tap on the previous turn, probably leading up to a coin skull on this turn, unless they want to try and pull off, you know, the fatigue plan where they go for a coin Gul'dan a turn earlier just to get every single turn of hero power activated as soon as possible is worth thinking. But when they have 10 cards in hand at the moment, they can't even go tap Doomsayer on this turn.
It's a very risky game to play, planning to go for the fatigue game early on, because again, against the Odd Warrior, they're gaining 4 armor every single turn. You're dealing 3. You're not getting there through the hero power alone.
Yeah.
Freaky will have more resources later on in the game after all of the shuffles. That's just not really how Singapore want to win this, but there's no Doomguard present in hand. So even if they do get the skull going off, it's going to be summoning Void Lords, and that's not what they want at all.
It's not perfect, but it's not bad. Like, Warriors struggle at dealing with Void Lords. They don't want to use a shield slam on it. If they silence it, you're very happy because they're not silencing your cubes. And what this play to me from Katsukari signifies is he thinks Doomsayer is not very useful in this matchup. He's just playing it to buy them a turn and lead into the skull. Whereas I think if he sets up a Void Lord and his opponent starts getting ahead on board, there could be some value with the Doomsayer later on.
All right, Dark, first crazy question. Is Azalina actually looking okay over the next few turns? Like, that's a good hand from Singapore, and Bulgaria's hand isn't actually premium yet. So maybe they could just play it. Get Gul'dan, get some Void Lords.
It's worth considering. Like, it's about how far behind in tempo they think they'll be, because the fact that by playing Zola, they don't copy the skull anymore. That effect is permanently in favor of Katsukari now, which means if they play 7 mana, a 3/3, and their opponent has a bunch of demons swarming down the board,
that's a problem.
and they lose all their removal, that's really bad. Whereas with their current hand, you know, they've got a Reckless Flurry, a Shield Slam. I don't think it's that bad. I think this is kind of the hand they want at the moment, short of some weapon destruction.
Faceless Manipulator as well. One of the things Hunter Ace was really emphasizing to us is that it's very versatile in this matchup.
Oh, yeah.
If you're copying a Giant and then Shield Slamming it, that puts you ahead. If you're copying a Cube that's got Void Lords or Doom Guards in, that's putting you ahead. Like, that card is capable of doing a lot of different things. Even just copying a Void Lord, and that's it. Right. That's fine.
But that's what you have to be careful of in this matchup, is saying that Faceless Manipulator is fine, because so often against Cube Warlock, the biggest threats of your cards isn't actually playing them, it's the threat of playing them. Like the fact that if you play all your silence cards, all of a sudden they can just go Cube, Prince Tal'Daram, they don't have to Dark Pact it, they make a million Doom Guards and you just die. Whereas if you save back the Faceless, save back the Silence, be as greedy as possible with it, they will start to make less greedy plays themselves just because they're afraid of being silenced or Faceless Manipulated.
But really, as we've been saying from the start, Bulgaria, they needed that weapon removal. They need to prevent the Doom Guard from being summoned in the first place. They want to force the Doom Guard being played from the hand.
Yeah, very much so.
It's a really interesting state, because Katsukari also has all these Void Lords everywhere, which means lots of Void Walkers, which again, as we said before, that does mean a weak Gul'dan. So maybe the lack of weapon removal doesn't even matter too much for Bulgaria at the moment.
It's not great.
It's not great, but it's not as awful as it could be.
Yeah. If it was against the likes of Control Warlock, where they're running Rin, then you actually start considering leaving the skull up.
Yeah.
It pulls out Azari and all that nonsense that gets into. But against the good old Cube Warlock, you're not afraid of the fatigue game plan. You are afraid of just being beaten down.
Wow. Zola the Gorgon being played on the Gem-Studded Golem. Okay.
You sound surprised at that.
It's not something you see every day, but it makes sense. Like you said, Gem-Studded Golem is a great pick from the Stonehill Defender. It's got a lot of stats. Yeah. Singapore lacking the removal. Just adding an extra one to the hand seems good.
I agree that Gem-Studded Golem is good right now. Like, it's a good card to discover. To copy with Zola. I just wonder if something later on would be more useful. Yeah. If you can go for Owl and then you Zola back the Owl, that's a lot of silence that you're adding through to your deck.
I mean, there are a lot of good targets for Zola in this deck. Even Zolaing something you faceless from the other side can be, like a Mountain Giant or something, could be good. Dynamatic can be great, Zola. There's so many good targets. So going with this, it felt a little bit preemptive to me.
But at the same time, the rest of their hand really does very, very little indeed. Outside of that, it was really looking for a mech with Omega Assembly, which is worth considering before you're at the full 10 mana. You can't afford to be all too greedy in this matchup.
It's starting to get scary.
Lovely play from Singapore as well, even working beautifully around the mind control tech. And it is starting to look scary. These Doom Guards, if they're not cleared off, not only will they just beat Freaky down over the next few turns, he could go Prince Tal'Daram on a Doomguard, which adds another one to the pool to resurrect with Blood Reaver Gul'dan.
Yeah, it's getting out of control. Even with the few Void Lords that have been summoned or are being summoned, it does look like there's going to be a lot of Doomguards in the long run now, and Prince Tal'Daram would just increase that. So Bulgaria have to focus on removing them, I guess. They could Reckless Flurry. That would just leave the Voidwalkers on the board. They could... Oh, it's a really hard turn.
Yeah, it's awkward here. And they, like, the way they've been playing it so far, they've been developing minions before using their removal spells, which is an understandable line of thought. You always expect it to get worse later on. So I wouldn't be too surprised in them to see Faceless Manipulator on the Void Lord, as that has been kind of keeping in line with their play so far. Here, however, they are finally saying, okay, this is scary enough. I'm throwing down some of that removal, because later on, there's a very good chance that a cube hits the board, and then all of a sudden, your Reckless Flurry really doesn't do much to mitigate the damage on the board whatsoever.
Playing out the second Super Collider as well, Katsukari's one and only weapon removal is gone, so Freaky can play this weapon as greedily as he wants to. He can just hold that back.
Yeah, you're really trying to use that for like 2 Mountain Giants on the board after they Faceless one of them or something is the dream. But just using it to clear up here will be, enough to just tickle the board back into your favor.
So we just found out that off stream, China just beat Hong Kong 3-2.
Oh wow!
In the winners match.
So China are through to tomorrow.
They are through to the semi-finals.
Wow.
China really making a splash in this year's Hearthstone Global Games.
Yeah, they've had little success in HCT, but it's good to see when you take the best of the best and put them together, they can make some magic happen. Singapore, again, just really a crossroads here, where I think that the main debate I imagine they're having is how much do we play for aggression versus how much do we play for value? Because make no mistake, they need to be the aggressor in this matchup. In Fatigue, they will not be winning this game, so they need to do stuff. Whatever it is, they need to be pulling ahead on the board, which they are at the moment. They are already in a good spot, pushing a bit of damage. But they need to then make the argument, do we play all our cards really quickly? Is that the best way to win the game before Fatigue? Or do we play it a little bit greedier? We still win before Fatigue, but it's a little bit slower. Good amount of pressure each turn, not overextending. Yeah. And that seems to be what they're going for.
They're kind of just hedging, right? They're taking the middle ground. They're dealing more damage, slightly more damage than the warrior can heal every single turn. And I guess they're hoping that they can just keep that up for the foreseeable future.
And like I said, I suppose on that particular turn, that wasn't the biggest decision, because outside of just tapping and passing, they could have played Umbra or played Tal'Daram. You want to be greedy with those cards. Those are the really explosive cards that you want to make some magic happen with. So now Coin Gul'dan would summon 2 Doomguards and a Void Lord, I believe, in terms of demons that have died so far, which is a very respectable amount of damage if you wanted to get that rolling right now.
The board falls into place perfectly there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's not bad at all. Can put Freaky straight down to 11.
Yeah. The problem with that play is if you didn't have the librarians in hand, then you might start to lose the combo activators in your deck. Like if you all of a sudden aren't drawing cube, you can't tap through to it, which I think is what Singapore is afraid of here, is that if their board is cleared off, their hand does nothing. After the Gul'dan Resurrection, there were no threats left in their hand before they drew this Mountain Giant. So clearly they want Bulgaria to kill off their demons first, then get an even more impactful resurrection afterwards.
That mind control tech could do some wonderful things. Mind control tech. Get the Void Lord, then Faceless the Void Lord. It's a lot of defense there.
Yeah, that's a pretty big wall you're putting up there. Yeah, you got to be a little bit careful on Bulgaria's side about using your trump card in just making a massive swing onto the board in your favor. You don't want to use all your resources at once,
of course,
because then you get Godfreyed. Is the real fear there, I think. But they are. It looks like going to be heading towards a mind control tech to give them the best chance of stealing the Void Lord or the Giant.
Yep, it's going to be a 50-50 chance for a good minion here. They get the Void Lord.
That's pretty nice.
And that's enough, right? Like, that's enough of a defense for now. They don't really need to play the Faceless, like I said before, because there's not really much power on the board for Katsukari.
That swings the Resurrections quite drastically. I'm trying to figure out if that's good or bad for Singapore in terms of the Resurrections, because they get less Void Lords, Void Walkers dying to be resurrected. I think it's bad. Like, they would rather have had a Void Walker stolen, because then the Void Walker doesn't die. But it's not the end of the world, is the point I'm trying to get across for Singapore.
I mean, they'd quite like to be able to connect to the face here, but
they would love to. I will agree with you there.
But that's looking somewhat difficult.
And still, they just haven't drawn the cards from their deck that do the explosive turns. They need Q. They need more more demons to be drawn. The remaining Doomguard would be lovely with this hand, just to get more demons resurrected with Gul'dan.
But both cubes lurking in the bottom half of the deck. Yeah. It's not what they wanted in this matchup. Godfrey's going to get played now, which means that in the future, Bulgaria don't need to worry about the king of all board clears.
Yeah, they can have much more liberty, I would say, to go nice and wide on the board with their mechs they got, which are really not that bad. You know, they're not the premier board control card, like maybe a Bulldozer to push a little bit of extra damage. But Taunts, just Rusty Recycler.
I mean, Dynamatic here just outright clears the board on its own with its Battle Cry. They have to play around Gul'dan a little bit now. They don't want to take 2 Doom Guards to the face.
Yeah.
But they're not dead yet, and they know they're not dead yet.
While you were, I believe, correctly talking about the potential of Azalina earlier on, I was saying, you know, their hand was a good amount of removal back then. They probably didn't want to go for it. Now they've alleviated the pressure off the board. If they're not met with a big redevelopment onto the board, I think they could start to think pretty carefully about Azalina.
Right. Well, it's a little bit worse now that all of the demons have been played, because like if they're getting a Gul'dan, it's literally just switching out the hero power. Well, and with Bulgaria's game plan, I'm not sure how much better the Gul'dan hero power is to tank up.
Yeah. And also for where Bulgaria sat, if their opponent have Blood Reaver Gul'dan, they'd probably just play it, which they are going to.
Right.
So if they Azalina next turn, there's basically no way they get Gul'dan, because if they have it, they just play it every time.
Yep.
But Gul'dan would have actually been really nice for Freaky, because he'd get back a Void Lord, wouldn't he, off of the...
Freaky's in trouble here. He needs a way of clearing this board immediately, or Katsukari could, in theory, go ahead, play a cube, and start to do the cube things. There isn't a way of clearing this board. Reckless Flurry with 4 armor just isn't enough. You could tank up Shield Slam and Reckless Flurry, I guess, to deal with one of the Doom Guards.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways to do it, I guess. If you go double attack into the Void Lord, silence it, hero power, Reckless Flurry, and attack into the Doom Guards. Oh, but even then, you only take it down to 5 health by attacking with both your minions.
It's not a clean kill by any means.
Ziliax, however, is a huge amount of life gain, if you wanted to go for that. Or just a Faceless on the Void Lord is a big old taunt.
Could even go Coppertail Ziliax, which would give the big old minion rush and lifesteal.
True.
What now?
Okay, I think this is the, okay, we can't clear the board, let's just try and get the best defense we possibly can. And try and outlive this assault.
Yeah, this makes a good amount of sense to me. They are realizing that they are just very, very close to dying.
And Katsukari needs to find Cube. Needs to find Cube right now. I wouldn't be surprised if they just throw down the Librarian.
not running a Spellbreaker in their list anymore, as the the Q block list is getting a little bit crowded for cards. You don't really have room for silence at the moment. And like you said, he really needs to find something to do with his hand. But again, it's just all the cards that don't do enough. But now with Hellfire, he has Hero Power Coin Hellfire, which I believe just gives him exact lethal with the 16.
No way.
That's it.
Well, who needs Carnivorous Cube? I guess, as Katsukuri and Team Singapore, they get there. They've taken their first win in what Team Norway just told us was an unfavorable matchup. They must be feeling very good about themselves right now.
Yeah, they just got exactly what you want to do in Q block. It's been that way since the dawn of the deck. You get Skull, and if you pull out 3 demons, get, what is that, 23's worth of mana being not eliminated. This is the losers bracket that we are in. So with whoever loses this match will simply be sent home. Well, they'll be able to enjoy Blue.
Yeah,
but they're
we
not
don't actually book a flight and say, right, off you go, bye guys. So it's going to be Bulgaria, it's going to be Silent Storm on the Death Rattle Hunter coming up versus Sequinox on the Control Priest. This is the Mind Blast version, although they are also running Archbishop Benedictus and Nightscale Matriarch, which is some interesting additions.
Yes, making the deck a little bit greedier, a little bit more game against Odd Warrior, although that is traditionally a bad matchup. I was thinking about how those greedier cards will affect this matchup, and I was kind of thinking it would make it a bit worse because you don't need to be presenting threats so much in Priest in this matchup as just having answers. You just need to be able to deal with their boards, which thankfully you absolutely can do. As Priest, you have the tools that you need, which so few control decks do have, to deal with a big Death Rattle Hunter board.
I believe they're running 1 copy of Mass Dispel along with, obviously, 2 copies of Psychic Scream, as is completely standard in all Priest decks pretty much nowadays.
Yeah, that is the way you are always going. Well, Silent Storm is on the Mechathune, or Bulgaria on the Mechathune Priest as opposed to the Control Priest version. But like you said, this version of the deck, it's a pretty standardized deck list at this point, and it's a pretty nice way to get things rolling for Singapore. They're not going to be facing down early aggression, which is a big first tick to get things rolling. You don't just want to be smoked down by eggs and devil saws. So if they can find themselves Anduin, maybe an Alex Straza, they could start to go on the aggressive pretty quick here.
So what's the game plan for the Hunter here, do you think, Derek? Are they trying to deal as much damage as quickly as possible? To what extent do they need to hold their threats back for after the Psychic Scream?
I think you want to be playing pretty aggressively as Silent Storm. He's already got in hand Katharina, which is probably the cornerstone of this matchup. Like when I said that the Priest has all the answers they need, that's later on. They have Psychic Scream, which is the main tool they're using to just negate any Death Rattles, shuffle every card back into the opponent's deck, every card on the board. But the Devil Saws that come out of the Devil Saw Egg are a little bit more difficult, I think, for the Priest to deal with. They're not running the Shadow Death to be able to deal with a 5/5 early on. Duskbreaker, obviously terrible against eggs because you just pop them for your opponent.
There's the first Psychic Scream drawn by Sequinox. Now, I was literally just about to ask you, how high a priority do you think Psychic Scream is off of the Shadow Visions? Because we're talking about how important that card is, how it's the way that they clear the board over and over. Do you think they're going to be disappointed that they've drawn the first Psychic Scream because it lowers the chances to get one from the Shadow Visions?
Yes, like I agree, usually Psychic Scream is the card you're picking, but it depends very much, I find, on the context of the game, because Psychic Scream is a symmetrical board clear. If you're ahead on board, you really don't want to be Psychic Screaming away your Twilight Drakes and your Northshire Clerics off the board. You want to be going then for Mind Blast, Power Word Shield, closing out the game through your board domination and then following up with damage through to face as well. But I think as it currently stands, with no Twilight Drake, not even a Duskbreaker to start developing onto the board, for the most part here, Singapore will be looking for those Psychic Screams.
There does come a point, though, where they do need to win the game. So they are going to want some Mind Blasts as well. Nightscale Matriarch is interesting because the Hunter's main removal comes in the form of Hunter's Mark. There's a Skulking Geist in Sequinox's hand. So there's actually a very real chance that one turn, Nightscale Matriarch comes down and just can't be dealt with.
Well, this has been one of Priest's, or Dragon Priest's, biggest win conditions for quite a long time. If you remember back to the kind of the Control Priests back before the rotation, where if you play Skulking Geist, your minions just don't die to Shield Slam, or Naturalize, or Hunter's Mark. You can just clear off all the cheap removal spells for 1 mana that are in a bunch of different classes. And then, like you said, Primordial Drake, Nightscale Matriarch, even the Twilight Drake, just stick on the board and they start chipping away for a very respectable amount of damage.
I wonder.
And for Sequinox, the desire to clear off this Howlmaster Shore is pretty apparent right now. This single card has just led Hunter to be able to do such disgustingly powerful things in the early turns of pretty much any matchup. It's somewhat less important against Priest when they are not usually developing quite so many minions for you to rush your beasts and mechs into as the Hunter. But it's still annoying for Singapore. I think it pretty much locks him into the game plan of having to go for a Psychic Scream. He's not winning the board before turn 7.
The Spider Bombs are just sitting there kind of uselessly in this matchup. Well, I mean, not necessarily in this matchup, but against Northshire Cleric, they're not doing anything. If there were Twilight Drakes on the board and all of that fun stuff, then the Spider Bombers would be having a great time, but Silent Storm just going to have to tempo it out. And it works out quite nicely with the rush. It deals with the Cleric. It prevents Singapore's card draw a little bit. It's not really what the card's for, though.
Yeah, Singapore is, I would imagine, not that sad about this. They're still on 30 health. And while Death Rattle Hunter is undeniably not an aggro deck, you still want to be playing fairly aggressively here. You want to go Devil Saw Egg into Play Dead plus Terrascale Stalker and start closing out the game as quick as possible, lest you just get chain Psychic Screamed, as we are probably going to be seeing here from Sequinox. Yeah. Again, if he was in a slightly more dominant position on the board, I suppose he would be thinking about you go for the Shadow Visions again to find yourself the other Mind Blast you have in your deck. But I completely agree. Psychic Scream, chaining them 2, maybe 3 turns in a row, or spacing them out in the later turns of the game, is exactly what you want to do to dominate the board.
Obviously, one of the key ways that Bulgaria win this game, or win any game with Death Rattle Hunter, is Deathstalker Exile, which is going to have the potential to come down very soon. And that's a pretty good way of playing around Psychic Scream, because you just keep generating more and more of these big threats. Eventually, the Priest runs out of Psychic Screams. You just slam on the board and win the game.
Yeah, it also makes the game plan a lot more interesting when you start considering the Priest's win condition, because for the whole course of this game, we've been talking about the Priest delaying, controlling the board, stalling out the game to get through to their win condition, but haven't even talked about the fact that when they get through to the late game, they play Shadow Reaper Anduin, Alex Straza, and try to kill their opponent with Mind Blast and that repetitive hero power that comes with the Death Knight for 2 damage to face each time. But Deathstalker Rexar really puts a spanner in the works for that game plan for Sequinox. You are getting Lifesteal minions. You are getting Life Drinker to get yourself more health. Even just the 5 armor that comes off of playing Deathstalker Rexar can really mess up the lethal plans for Sequinox if he was going to be going for that.
It's a hard turn, though, because now for Singapore, they want to get rid of Shore. They'd love to play the Skulking Geist. But getting rid of the Shore would mean playing the Dustbreaker, which would mean proccing the Egg. So Bulgaria did set that up quite nicely and make it pretty messy for Singapore there. Though Skulking Geist does do a lot of work against Death Rattle Hunter. I already pointed out the Hunter's Mark. But losing the Play Deads too before Silent Storm has had the chance to play either of them. It's a pretty good result.
Yeah, because Sequinox isn't so much afraid of Cube as he is afraid of Carnivorous Cube into Play Dead or into Terrascale Stalker. Because if you're being hit for 16 damage with a King Crush after it's been cubed and Play Deaded, that's when it gets scary. Whereas if they just cube a big minion, you can then go Psychic Scream, Master Spell, get rid of it, get rid of that Death Rattle, and you're still very happy as Team at Singapore.
I'm not sure that we've mentioned yet, one of the additions to Bulgaria's Death Rattle Hunter is Swamp King Dread, which has been creeping its way into this archetype more and more over the last couple months. It just fits the curve very nicely. It's a 7 mana 9/9. You play the Highmane, you play the Dread, you play the Katarina.
Yeah, this play from Bulgaria, it's an interesting one because obviously it leads to a pretty scary amount of damage on board, which is good. That's what you want to do in this matchup, is get a good amount of pressure. It also means going into turn 7, you make a board which has no death rattles, which you're quite happy with it being Psychic Screamed away then, because it gets rid of that card and leaves you the ability to maybe stick a Katharina on the board. But that play played a lot into the Dustbreaker that we see here from Sequinox. And given they were playing around it so heavily on the previous turn, and now play so directly into the Dustbreaker, they start to raise a couple of alarm bells.
Well, there you go. Let's get going with Deathstalker Rexar. Bulgaria can curve it to Katharina and not worry about running out of resources from this point onwards. For Singapore, though, Alexstrasza, they're ready to start dealing some serious damage.
They are, but they need to be really careful about how they sequence this out from their opponents. And I think this is actually a pretty clever line of play they're taking here by not just slamming down the Primordial Drake, because the biggest thing they're afraid of going into turn 8 is obviously Katharina.
Yep.
It's one of the most devastatingly powerful cards ever printed in Hearthstone. When you're pulling out the likes of King Crush and Savannah Highmails. So they really want to Psychic Scream it on the next turn. That is, if Katharina is played, that's very likely what they play on the following turn. So they don't want to play their best minion going into that Psychic Scream turn. This makes a lot of sense to me, to not go for the Drake and instead play some slightly weaker minions to set up for a Scream.
So this is interesting for Singapore then. What do they do here? Do they deal damage to the face, get rid of the armor, then Scream? Do they deal with the Katharina, then Scream? It's complicated. The more I look at it, the more I think I like getting rid of the armor and then shuffling in these weak cards into the Death Rattle Hunter deck, the Ooze and the Pyromancer.
I like the look of that. In Bulgaria's deck, they are not... Oh, sorry, they're playing one Stitch Tracker, which means they have the top deck of either Katharina or the Stitch Tracker
to get the
Katharina.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's close. It is close. And they may not even Psychic Scream on this turn. I suppose they could go for an aggressive push with Alexstrasza, but Swamp King Dread just munches that up very happily. Yeah, I think they're realizing Psychic Scream has to be the play on this turn. They do, however, come to the conclusion that they want that Katharina out of the way. They do not want to be facing that anytime soon.
So Dread and Witchwood Grizzly go back into the deck. There's also a Savannah Highmane in there, Beastwise, but it just doesn't matter too much now because the Katharina is gone. King Crush can just be slammed down this turn, but does that actually do anything? I don't think so. Well, deals 8 damage, but that's it. Then it dies.
It does something, yeah. And that's clearly what they're thinking here. They want to get the value rolling before they leave themselves dying to Shadow Reaper Anduin.
Should mention that Bulgaria haven't seen Twilight Acolyte or Cabal Shadow Priest yet. I believe there are 2 copies of each of those cards in the... Yeah, there are. There are 2 copies of each of those cards in Sequinox's deck. So any single big minion that gets thrown down by Silent Storm could just get stolen.
Yeah. Very true. Which is a big reason, point of reasoning for Bulgaria's play here, because I'm still not convinced that it was right to not play King Crush. Because,
really?
Well, if your opponent had Anduin, they very possibly would have just played it last turn.
True.
Right, on when you played Katharina, because it's not that much better to shuffle in with Psychic Scream.
Right.
They clearly didn't want the Katharina shuffled back into the deck because they killed it off first. So you can probably rule out Anduin, maybe not necessarily.
I don't know, because Anduin would have left the Witchwood Grizzly on the board, so it's not super clear-cut.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a very close one. And I can see the reasoning. If you want to save King Crush for when you already have a board to make it multiple threats, they can't just Anduin because you already have a very scary board of minions.
And also, again, with Bulgaria playing 2 threats, going a little wide, it does play around that Cabal Shadow Priest combo that I was referring to a few moments ago. If they can hold back King Crush and just play it for lethal later, obviously that's the ideal scenario.
Yeah.
Cube is, again, it hasn't been drawn this game, but seems almost unplayable because a Cube being stolen by the Priest would be a disaster.
But this is a facet of Hearthstone that we just come back to time and time again of when do you play around stuff? When do you have the liberty to play around stuff? I agree, there were massive punishes for playing King Crush. Are they in such a good spot that they can afford to play around it? I think probably yes.
Yeah,
I think they're in a decent spot right now, so they can afford to make those slightly safer plays. They don't need to take big risks. Because for all they know, Singapore's hand is complete rubbish. That's the way it looks at the moment. They're not playing anything.
That was a snap pick Psychic Scream from the Shadow Visions there, though. Mind Blast was an option. So clearly, Sequinox isn't even considering the win the game part of this game just yet. They just want to survive for as long as they can. And healing that turn and passing was fine, you know? There's not that much damage on the board. They're not under any real pressure just yet.
Yeah, the Mind Blast was kind of a consideration because you have Alex Straza, you have 2 Mind Blasts, maybe a third to be picked up with the last remaining 1 in the deck.
Yep.
If you find Anduin, that's a lot of pressure you're putting forward. But
Big if, though.
Exactly. What is more likely to happen? Are you more likely to draw Anduin, or are they more likely to develop a big amount of pressure? They develop pressure every time. There is no 6-card Hunter hand plus the hero power that does nothing onto the board. And this Vicious Scale Hide for Silent Storm, I am struggling to think of a reason why you would not take that in this matchup. It's just an incredibly powerful option to be taken. But in the end, he goes for making the same zombies as last time. It worked well for him before, I suppose. So just making more poisonouses to throw down onto the board. But I kind of wonder if when you have so much stuff in your hand anyway, you have plays to make, you have threats to throw down onto the board. I think getting the backup plan for later on, if you are hit with an Alex Straza or an Anduin, instead just developing a lifesteal in your hand to heal back up afterwards might have been a slightly less risky option.
So many Psychic Screams for Sequinox now. Still 2 more available. He's not going to be dying anytime soon to Bulgaria. And I guess that's sort of the point. Now they've got time to dig deeper into that deck to find Shadow Reaper Anduin and then to combo it with the Alex Straza and get some sort of 2 or 3 turn setup.
The Bulgaria now very clearly on the hero power train, wanting to get the value as much as possible, which is not always correct in this matchup. It's not against the likes of Odd Warrior, a very different control deck where their win condition is pretty much always just fatigue, or maybe some kind of a swing onto the board. Very little burst through to face at all. Against this deck, you generally want to play a bit quicker, but it's working out for them here. They're developing a good amount of pressure each turn and finding themselves the option with lifesteal, which I think they finally chose there with the Vicious Scale Hide, is working out okay. I do still also want to point out, I would have preferred to have seen the Vicious Scale Hide on the previous turn as well. It's just the best zombies in so many situations.
That is true. One of the cards that sort of almost single-handedly buffed Rexar to the strength that it is now.
Yeah. And again, a difficult turn here for Silent Storm where yeah, I'm not sure if I agree with this because, I suppose maybe I'm being a little bit too cautious. I'm thinking, I'm falling into the trap myself of what do you play around? Because obviously if Singapore have Alex Straza into Anduin and you're taking a bunch of damage, you'd love a couple of extra lifesteal minions knocking about in the hand. Usually that's not the case though. Usually they're just going to be clearing off the board, healing up, playing Shadow Visions, things like that.
It did mess Equinox up, though, because this Primordial Drake didn't actually clear up anything.
Yeah.
It's protecting him, sure, but these minions are still on the board. And while Silent Storm does have this lifesteal minion, that Alex Straza isn't quite as threatening as it would be otherwise. These aren't the best builder beasts I've ever seen throughout this game so far, I've got to say.
Well, I think they've been respectable. I mean,
actually, that is a really good one. I take it back entirely.
That's a nice one, especially because he got the option of stealth, which I imagine he would have taken off the Giant Wasp to go in combination with the Tundra Rhino, which is a very classically powerful combo in Death Rattle Hunter, just meaning every single beast that you generate can just go directly to the face, as any good Hunter player should.
It's got to be tempting to just throw down that Zombeast and just leave it stealthed. This is just such a huge setup. Now they actually hit with it, though. I guess it's weak to Psychic Scream regardless of what happens, so keeping it stealth doesn't have the such a big advantage as it would in other matchups.
Yeah, I suppose this does demand an answer, doesn't it? Because I was going to make the point of, if you're going for this play, why don't you go Spider Bomb Terror Scale Stalker?
Yep.
Because that then clears off the minion, you're pushing the same amount of damage to face. But that Tundra Rhino, man, does that demand an answer. Yeah. And it means that the Psychic Stream has to be used on what was probably not the most powerful board that Bulgaria will be making for the rest of the game.
Oh my goodness, he drew it immediately! That's getting slammed down this turn as soon as this beast's been built. Not immediately, but Bittertide Hydra is great when combined with Lifesteal. Otherwise, not so much.
Well, I mean, you just play it. Like, it's just a big minion. You could go for Night Prowler on this turn because there's nothing else in play. And it gives you a pretty even amount of stats. It just comes down to the decision, which I'm sure they will be having. Do we ever play the minion we generate over
the zombies?
The Tundra Rhino zombies, which is incredibly powerful. You really want to get down a stealth Rhino as quick as you can.
Again, the Rhino, if just played on the board, followed up by Cube Terrascale Stalker, that can just be game-winning. Although Bulgaria, they're just going to keep smacking it into the face. They just don't care. While it's dealing 4 damage, it's doing its job, I guess, as far as they're concerned. It's a little bit short-sighted, but you can see the logic.
Well, yeah. What are the punishes? If you leave it stealthed, it can get mass dispelled, which isn't that bad because you still have 4/7. It's really just that you might get hit with the old Twilight
Cabal
into Cabal. Yeah.
It is a big risk, given that, again, they've not seen either of these cards played yet. But I guess they've decided it's how they win the game.
Yeah. Oh man, it is a big risk though, because if you are hit with Twilight Acolyte into Cabal Shadow Priest, that's so bad for you.
Right.
It's really, really bad. You then would have to go Spider Bomb double Terror Scale, I guess, to try and mop up the board and push a little bit of extra damage. But you get 4 damage through to face. You start closing out the game. I've been talking about how you need to play aggressive. And they've clearly been shown so far that that combo is not there, or the minion would already have been stolen.
Sequinox is going to have to just Psychic Scream this. Okay.
He was obviously considering it.
I mean, you have to consider it. All beasts having charge, given that there's potentially several zombies here that have been drawn off of the Psychic Scream, that's scary.
Instead, just developing as much as he can onto the board. And now comes the big punish because King Crush has charge. Could you imagine?
Yeah, actually. I can imagine that.
Okay. Yeah, no cube into Terror Scale nonsense, which was the really big punish that Sequinox could have been hit with.
Where are these cubes today?
Yeah.
What's going on?
They are right down in the bottom of the deck, it seems.
Just going for as aggressive zombies as possible, I guess.
Yeah, I think that was Life Drinker plus Swamp Leech, which means because it has Lifesteal, you gain back 6 when you play it, and it has Lifesteal as well. So this is I think, a good switch from Bulgaria. I think what I might have liked to see was them to make this turn a little bit sooner, where they start keeping back the Lifesteal minions, going for the healing minions. But now they've realized they're in such a dominant spot on the board. I love the fact that they are taking those healing minions, because they realize that is what they get punished.
Look at that! The Wind Fury, Divine Shield, Poisonous, and charge off of the Tundra Rhino to just clear the board. Tundra Rhino remains untouched. And now Singapore, getting the wrong piece of the combo for the second time, have to do something about this minion.
They are just in the exact same position once again, where they think, do we Psychic Scream this? We're down at 4 less health than we were last time.
How do they win if they do Psychic Scream? Because Silent Storm now has so many powerful minions in the deck, in the hand, in the hero power. Like, with no Psychic Scream left as insurance, Bulgaria can just play everything and not worry. It can just go as wide as possible. But no choice.
And this really could not have gone much worse for Singapore. And this does kind of make you imagine, what were they expecting to happen where their opponent, they developed with the Twilight Drakes last turn. How does their opponent not clear off their board? What hand could they have where their Drakes don't die?
Right.
I think there's a pretty good chance with Spider Bomb still in the deck, Death Rattle activators in the form of Terror Scale, King Crush, whatever that can be built off the Zombies. There was a pretty good chance, I think, that all the Drakes get cleared off and you're in the exact same spot where you have to just Psychic Scream it away.
Bulgaria just spoiled for choice here as to which way they want to go about this. Which of these absurdly powerful minions do we want to play first? To be fair, there's not that many.
It's not insane. Like, they can go Egg, Terror Scale, Flanking Strike, or Egg, double Terror Scale. I think they'd probably rather Flanking Strike their own Egg if they're going to do any of that. They might just go for the Hero Power, I suppose, actually, because they think that's a decent enough board already. Okay, or the Glutton, whatever.
3/3.
I like saving back the second Terror Scale is the main point I'm trying to make with this play.
This is setting up the 2-turn lethal. Well, no, because just the Hero Power actually brings Singapore out of range again. Yeah, I mean, putting 2 more damage on the board by activating that Egg a second time with the second Terror Scale would have set up lethal with the King Crush. So I don't know if I fully understand that turn.
I mean, yeah, they've seen all the Psychic Screams now, haven't they? So I think going for a Flanking Strike on your own Egg really wasn't that ridiculous.
That or the second Terror Scale, either of which would have set up lethal next turn.
You just want to, yeah, that's the point. You want to be setting up lethal every time next turn. Because now that you've seen no less than 4 Psychic Screams being played by your opponent, you can be pretty sure that the amount of removal left is fairly low.
Better late than never, I suppose, is the best thing to say about this combo now. It's taken a 5-5, which is pretty underwhelming. 14 damage available to Silent Storm right now with the King Crush.
Which he has to be considering. How does it play into Anduin? I think it's because all the Screams are gone, they're thinking, what AoE can they play that punishes us here? So what happens if they play Anduin? They go King Crush, push everything face. Anduin's pretty bad for them. They will be pretty far behind on board at that point, and they will have, opponent will have gained armor. Divine Hymns can only be so far away. So I think after the conclusion of we probably don't set up lethal a lot of the time, I really don't mind the fact that they're just going with the Builder-Beast here, because it just gives them immediate pressure, but also extends their ability to go into the late game so much more effectively.
Good old stealth hungry crab.
I wish we could have a stealth hungry crab to deal with those Murlocs walking around the BlizzCon here.
Yeah, right.
Interrupting our broadcast.
Well, now what, Saquinox?
So Singapore could very well just make the huge gambit here of going Alexstrasza to their opponent's face, hit them with the Twilight Acolyte, which would bring them down to, what, 14? And then pray there's no heal, and they top deck the other Mind Blast. That's an out. That's a way they could win this game.
Incredibly, Silent Storm once again hasn't set up the 2-turn lethal. King Crush is 1 damage off at the moment, and that's if Singapore don't heal.
Oh, what, are you assuming if that's the trade coming in with the Acolyte? Because they have 11 damage on board.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's awkward because now, like, if the trade does happen, then it's not lethal. If the trade doesn't happen and they heal, it's still not lethal. So it does seem like 1 extra damage could have made all of the difference here. Wow, they're going to try and get some of that board control back.
Yeah, I think this is more likely to work out for them because they can go trade Divine Hymn, heal back up.
Yeah.
They are much more likely to win the game, I think, through board control than they are to go with the Hail Mary I was thinking of, where you just top deck exactly the second Mind Blast and they can't kill you and they have no heal.
Right.
It's a lot of things that have to go your way to win the game in that fashion. And it's not even looking that bad because Silent Storm has been playing it slowly, conservatively, this matchup right from the get-go by, holding back on Flanking Strike on his own Egg, holding back on the King Crush right from the start. It has got himself into a situation where He's just not winning the board quickly enough, and that Spider Bomb is a big nuisance.
It just feels to me as though ever since that last Psychic Scream was played, Bulgaria should have just been saying, yep, let's just put as much as we can on the board, put as much power as we possibly can all over this board, and put Singapore on the clock. And they're still looking fine. Actually, they're still looking very good, actually, when you take Sequinox's hand into consideration.
It's turning around pretty well for them. They now have, what, 11, 14 damage on the board, which means 14 plus the 8 from King Crush would bring them up to 22. So no lethal represented for Sequinox, which they will be calculating. They'll know they're pretty safe in terms of dying on the next turn. So again, Alexstrasza to face is something to think about here if you think that's your only shot, because all Psychic Screams are gone. Anduin at this point is starting to become too late. I think they're going to have to start making those risky plays if they want to pull this game out. It won't work, as we can see with the Life Drinker Zombeast and Ziliax. That would heal them for 9, I think, in one turn, which would pretty much lock Sequinox out of the game.
Sequinox, I mean, Team Singapore have had a couple games now with some quite awkward draws. They managed to win the last game, sure, but they failed to draw Carnivorous Cube in any prompt fashion. Yeah. And now it's Shadow Reaper Anduin just right at the bottom of the deck. And as with all of the decks that are focused around hero cards, when that happens, you're in a pretty rough state.
They're going with the Alexstrasza, and he is going face with the Cabal Shadow Priest. I think this is a really good recognition of how bad their situation is here. Sequinox realizes we're not winning this game in the usual timeline. We need to shake things up here and make some magic happen, which is exactly what they are trying to do here. But with the Zombeast healing the back up for, I believe, 6 in one fell swoop because of the lifesteal aspect of the damage they're dealing. And the Ziliax is just way out of range. They need Anduin right now to have any chance. And to be honest, I'm wondering if even that would work.
Even Anduin leaves the 3-3 and the 2-2s from the Savannah Highmane on the board. It would prevent lethal. But there you go, the second Twilight Acolyte just being drawn a few turns too late.
And this is the problem of all these control decks that rely so heavily around their Death Knights. Right. Yes, when you draw them, they are devastatingly powerful. We've learned that to be true in Hearthstone. But Control Mage, Control Warlock, Control Priest, all these decks, when you don't find the Death Knight, you're just going to lose. As we can see here, plenty enough damage. Or actually, is that exactly enough damage? A little over damage to close things out with King Crush here, which means Bulgaria will be equalizing the playing field here at 1 game apiece.
Even though they are 1 man down, it doesn't mean they are going to take this one lightly. Tying up the series. Again, the elimination series. Loser of this match will be going home. Well, not going home, but losing the HGG finals.
And I think that was very nicely done by Bulgaria there. There was some consideration, I suppose, that could be, or some concern that could be drawn with how they were building their beasts, I think was the main thing I was not sure about. And in terms of how much they were pressing that hero power button, generally in these control matchups, you want to be pressing the hero power build a beast button as much as you possibly can to get that.
They are still looking slightly favored against Bulgaria.
Oh, yes.
Though Bulgaria have now closed the gap slightly.
Yeah, I think it's still looking good for Singapore, because even though I would call this a slightly favorable matchup for Bulgaria, it's going to be far from a runaway success. And not only that, there are some matchups in Hearthstone that it is difficult to play. It's difficult to lose them, to be honest. Like Odd Paladin up against Murloc Mage or something.
Oh, I find a way, Derek.
Okay. Well,
I find a way.
Most people, most sentient human beings will struggle to be losing those matches.
Anyone playing here, for example.
Fair enough. The way the decks line up against each other, one deck just comes out on top the vast majority of the time. This matchup is very difficult. Right. There's a lot you have to be playing right. It's not just the fact that one deck innately beats the other. You have to be playing cleverly. You have to know what you're looking to do. When do you swap? What cards are you trying to steal? What do you naturalize? When do you naturalize? Togwaggle Druid is an immensely difficult deck to play.
I also just love it for some reason.
Yeah,
like it's hard, but it feels so rewarding when you get there, when you get that combo. There's something about playing this deck.
Absolutely. If you haven't done so yet, find any opportunity you can to listen to on stream, like the gods of Torgwaggle Druid. At the moment, the main ones I like listening to are Purple and Elfandor,
yeah.
both of whom play an unhealthy amount of Torgwaggle Druid, I think it's fair to say. And the way they talk about it, it just seems like they're talking another language at first, but it all starts to come together. Towards the end of the game, you realize everything they've said was true all along. And best Udir EU here for Bulgaria. We're going to have to hope he also has the same understanding and lock on the matchup.
Now, best Udir EU was taking a little nap when I spoke to Bulgaria earlier. And, you know, quite rightly so. These teams have traveled a long way to come to BlizzCon, you know, from Asia and from Europe, respectively. And he was enjoying the little nap, but his team was saying about him that he is, out of all of them, the person that's the most nervous. He's the youngest of the team. Both him and one of the other players were 19, but he is the younger of the two 19-year-olds. And apparently he's feeling a little bit, but he's got his team behind him to make him feel a little bit better.
Well, like if you think he's young now, I specifically remember casting Best Udir EU in one of the first tournaments I ever casted in like a really small Open Cup where he got really far into it. I'm not sure if he won it, but got a deep run into an Open Cup. And he must have been like 16, 17 then at the time. So he's been putting away, you know, grinding away in Hearthstone for a good long while. So I imagine while, yes, he will be feeling nervous, he should hopefully have, you know, letting his instincts take over, get into the flow state of this matchup.
Reasonable start for both sides there. Bulgaria with the Wild Growth, Crumpled with the Callisa. They're the two drops they both won.
Yeah.
But now things are starting to get a little bit out of control for Crumpled. Best Udo wants to see his Nourish as quickly as possible so that he can ramp into Ultimate Infestation and really get his deck rolling. Yeah,
he does want to find that Nourish as quick as possible, but he did not do everything he could in order to find that Nourish. I believe, if I was looking correctly, he kept King Togwaggle off of the Mulligan, which is not something you generally do in Togwaggle Druid. You want to be relying on the immense amount of card draw in your deck to be seeing you through to it.
But I suppose against a deck like Shadowwalk Shaman, where firstly, their hand is often very full, so you can just naturalize Togwaggle at some point to switch decks.
Yes.
And secondly, where burning a single card or stealing a single card can shut down their entire win condition, I can get to the logic.
And I really like you bring up the fact that you can go naturalize Togwaggle at some point, because I was actually playing this exact matchup with Hunter Ace yesterday when we were hanging around backstage. And I was asking him that exact question. If you just go for a swap on like turn 9 or 10, and you both have like 16 cards left in your deck, who wins? Do you generally win with them just having a few Druid cards and you maybe stealing some of the combo? And he was saying in his experience, you don't win that. As the Druid, you will just be losing to the Druid cards that your opponent is playing, because they will just dominate on the board. And yes, they will have half the Shuttlewalk combo that doesn't do anything, but you'll also have half a Shuttlewalk combo that doesn't do anything.
I guess it must, to an extent, come down to which player ends up with the Shuttlewalk itself.
Yes, I imagine that will be a big part of it. But you don't want to be tempo shuttlewalking, I think, in this matchup usually, unless you've had your Grumble stolen maybe off of the Togwaggle effect. You want to be going for the full combos Shuttlewalk whenever possible.
That's very interesting.
And like, there's just so much to talk about already in this matchup. This is just how cerebral it is of a matchup. Like Bulgaria, drawing off branching paths there. How often do you see players drawing with branching paths when they have UI in hand? You just don't do that usually. Like, I suppose I am more of a Malagos Druid player, and you draw less generally with Malagos. You are less willing to draw cards because you don't have an ultimate win condition in Fatigue like Togwaggle Druid does. But still, the way it's looking, if he wants to play UI on 10 mana, he is going to be overdrawing cards. Very, very likely. And I think I probably would have liked to have seen at least one armor gain off of that, because what are you looking for in the meanwhile? It's exactly Nourish or Wild Growth are the only cards that really make your mid-game better leading up to UI.
Zero mana Electra, not exactly premium for Crumpled. Out of all of the cards that he could have gotten discounted, like, what spell does he even want to play twice at any point?
He could go for a Farsight, I suppose, the other one that he hasn't played so far.
That's true. But that's seeming like the only good one, unless Bulgaria does somehow end up with a huge board, in which case the double Volcano or the double Lightning Storm could come in handy. Is this a Hagatha game, Derek?
It could very well be a Hagatha game. It's not going to be your win condition usually if you're going for the full Shudderwock combo. But again, if you get your Shudderwock stolen through the Togwaggle effect, or you get the Grumble stolen off the Togwaggle effect, maybe that just gives you the little bit of extra value that you need to win in the late game. Oh, okay, yeah, he's playing the Tyrant. I was very confused by the ordering there of the play before I realized obviously it's a play around mind control tech.
Right.
Pretty well done actually by Bulgaria. I guess they're coming to the conclusion that if they were to have a minion stolen there, they'd be a little bit too far behind, which I think is a good assumption. With the play gone from their hand, that would have been a little bit too scary to have been MCT'd.
Seem happy there, though. Freaky on the left there was just giving his teammates a big grin about that last turn.
It's a good play.
But Singapore looking very focused. It's great to actually have the teams here in person now, because we've been saying throughout the Hearthstone Global Games, we love it when they're playing together, interacting with each other in the same room. But having them here standing next to each other on the beautiful stage behind us is something else entirely. Yeah,
I absolutely love it. It's one of the reasons why I was such a big fan of Team Spain before they were sadly eliminated from the Global Games. You know, Akawanda was telling us his biggest strength is their camaraderie, their friendship that they have with each other.
Because they had a psychologist specifically to work with the team and to improve that.
It led them to do, what was the thing they did from the anime thing?
The Ginyu Force pose?
Exactly.
The thing they did from the anime thing. Yeah.
I don't watch that.
Not even when you were younger?
No.
Never watched Dragon Ball Z?
Never. I wasn't allowed much TV when I was a kid.
Ah.
How quickly that changed. That's so cruel.
A tangled web.
As now for Bulgaria, they are in that spot I was hypothesizing they would arrive at when you double draw off of branching paths. How are you ever going to be playing the Ultimate Infestation on the following turn?
They've got a good hand, though. If they just played Dream Petal this turn, they can't now, obviously, but it guarantees the discount on one of the vital combo pieces.
Yes, it does.
Like, that must have been worth considering. I guess they feel as though there's too much pressure on the board and that they needed to find a way of dealing with some of this, and the Spellstone pickup is going to deal with one of these 4/4s nicely.
Like, yeah, in my opinion, I think it's a good realization that they're not going for the combo yet.
Yeah.
That's probably not happening soon. They need to be drawing with UI first so that they give their opponent less value when they swap the decks. Going for the hero power here does give them more flexibility on their following turn because it doesn't lock them into UI. But going with the Spellstone would have allowed them to just play UI.
Well, it prevents the UI. Sort of.
It doesn't prevent it because they have the three key cards in Dream Petal, Dream Petal, Azalina, and King Togwaggle in order to activate that deck swap and the copying of King's Ransom to make sure they always end up with the bigger deck at the end in Fatigue.
It's a strange position you can end up with, actually, with Ultimate Infestation in this deck, because as you said, once the important pieces have been drawn, I've literally seen Ultimate Infestation played before just to burn 4 cards. Just, yep, I'm just emptying my deck. Let's go.
I wonder.
It's just like all laws of physics in Hearthstone just are just thrown out the window when Togwaggle enters the fray. Like
and also Shudderwock.
Also Shudderwock, yeah. Like I was playing a game against Shudderwock earlier where I just went for against Togwaggle, where I was going for a Doom Pack to destroy as many minions as possible. I wanted to just destroy my own deck because by doing so I knew he would get a worse deck in the end. It's very, very weird how it all works out. As you were wondering, is this a Hagatha game? Clearly Singapore.
It's a Hagatha game.
It is. Yep, they want to get that value rolling because with no card draw in hand, no Grumble, no Life Drinker, no Shudderwock. I suppose they've actually already played a Life Drinker, so it's just the Shudderwock and the Grumble that they need now. But it's nowhere in sight. They need to be getting those, getting the card draw rolling, which Hagatha will maybe afford them through an Elementary reaction or a Farsight.
Plagued.
I mean, I'd have to imagine they go for a UI here. You are way more willing to burn cards now. Generally in Togwaggle you are. And also when you have the 3 key combo pieces here.
Yeah, I know. For some reason, I keep going back to this Razor Petal. Sorry, Dream Petal. And it looks like Best Uda keeps going back to it as well. But I agree with your logic. Like, playing that Ultimate Infestation, it does mean the game is going to end faster. So...
And like what I'm saying now is I still think UI probably should be played here to dominate the board and make sure you don't fall behind.
Yep.
I think what I would have liked even more was to see Armor Game offer the branching paths. I think that was the way to go to make sure you can very freely play the UI here.
Right.
The obvious downside is you draw more cards, which means you draw minions, which means the Dream Petal is less likely to go on the Togwaggle or the Azalina.
Okay.
But Togwaggle is built in a way that every other minion you can just play. You don't want to get a specific use out of it necessarily. Bulgaria, they're playing, what, the 2 mind control techs, the Tyrants. Pretty much every other minion could have just been thrown out of the hand on that or the next turn. There's no minions in the deck. It's almost all spells. But what it does mean is they have a Dream Petal, which can't really be answered right now.
Engaging TC-130 mental dislocator.
It's not that bad, but it can't really be answered right now because even if they decide to not go for the Earthshock, which I imagine they will, giving your opponent double mana reduction in Togwaggle is not that bad. They can already do the combo where they steal your whole deck.
There's a good chance it just hits the same minion again anyway. And doesn't do anything else.
But I still think it's probably worth it just to start clearing cards out of the hand in the form of the Earthshock anyway.
Things are starting to look great for Bulgaria, though. Unless Singapore picks up the Shudderwock and the Grumble immediately, Bulgaria are just going to be ending the game in the next few turns.
They are indeed. Ooh, even an Innovate picked up as well to get less cards burnt off the top. This is really perfect for them.
Yep, able to clear the board in its entirety. Crumpled has no pressure whatsoever. And has to focus on clearing Best Uda's minions. But Best Uda doesn't care about that. He doesn't need these minions to win the game.
So now that Best Uda has got the step 1 of the plan fully in check, he's got that done. He's reduced the cost of either Azalina or Togwaggle. He's drawn a few cards so far. He needs to decide how he progresses through this game, which is not easy in Togwaggle. There are many different ways you can approach the same few core cards to try and win a fatigue battle. I think the standard one, which he will probably go for, is just draw as much as possible, try and get the deck swap, and steal an important minion from his opponent with the deck swap. But maybe we see, like you were talking about, double naturalized Togwaggle, and just try and go for a deck swap without the Azalina to pull things back.
Crumpled emptying his hand fairly well, though, leaving only 6 cards. So it would have to be double naturalized Togwaggle if Bulgaria wanted to do it that way. But maybe they just draw. Maybe they just go Ferocious Howl, or the branching path to draw 2, Ferocious Howl, and just dig through that deck.
Yeah.
The sooner they run out of the cards, the sooner they win the game.
Now that he's not trying to set up for a UI to draw, I would be very happy with branching paths. To go for card draw here, you just want to cycle, power through that deck as quick as possible, and then very possibly in the next turn or two, go for a Togwaggle swap. I mean, he's clearly considering it right now.
There it is.
He's just going for it.
Naturalize, probably naturalize both of the minions, and then play the Azalina to get their very own copy of the King's Ransom. And also their own copy of the cards that have now just been drawn by Singapore. So Bulgaria are going to end up with some Druid cards in their hand too.
Death is eternal.
Yeah, this is an interesting line of play because the obvious unspoken benefit of this line of play is Uda is it denies Crumpled a Shaman card draw.
Yep.
It denies him a draw from his original deck, which means he's 1 card further away from Grumble or Shudderwock. And now Uda knows that's kind of worked out for him.
In theory, Uda now has perfect knowledge because he's seen the hand, he's seen the deck, he knows that Shudderwock hasn't been drawn yet. And I wouldn't even be surprised if we see a concede from Singapore soon. I don't know how they win now.
Really? I mean, they have, not right now because they're overloaded, but King's Ransom Nourish. which could potentially just draw them Shudderwalk and Grumble in the same
Yeah,
turn.
you're right. You're right.
This isn't over.
I hadn't thought about that.
Crumpled. But I agree, it's not looking particularly good for them right
They
now.
just need to empty their hand. Look at that. Healing Rain for 2.
And, you know, Udyr also has to be able to survive on board. There's a Spellstone in Crumpled's hand, as the Shudderwalk is just overdrawn there.
That's not a problem anymore.
Yeah, we can see Freaky laughing about that. That is perfectly fine for him. He really does not care that he can't play the Shudderhawk himself because it would just do... Would it do literally nothing, I think, for him? It would just be a 9-man 6/6.
It would swap decks, right? And then copy hand again.
Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, no, yeah.
We don't want
I'm
that.
not dealing that. I am not worrying about all that nonsense. And, yeah, as long as his opponent can't have it, Udyr is very, very happy indeed. So now the only thing he really needs to worry about is surviving on board and making sure he's not outvalued. He knows that his opponent can steal 3 cards from the good deck, quote unquote.
Almost out of cards.
But then after he goes King's Ransom Nourish, Udyr could then go Nourish King's Ransom, which means he draws 3 cards from the bad deck. Oh, there's only 1 card left. Okay, so I guess he wouldn't go for that. But either way, we can see Bulgaria here quite happily pulling pretty far ahead in fatigue.
I'm out of cards.
And there it is, the last card being drawn, swapping back, I would imagine, for Udyr and just trying to win this fatigue battle. It's looking good. It's not over, but it's looking good.
It's not going to be a difficult fatigue battle to win, is it?
Like there's Hagatha and there's Grumble. And Hagatha and Grumble are really the best of friends. They can make some really powerful effects happen.
Especially with 2 1-drops in the hand as well. The double Glacial Shard.
That's exactly right. And especially if you have any minions on board, you can just bounce them back, get more spells. If he was able to get more Spellstones to copy the Grumbles, if he was able to get... I don't even know. Oh, actually, he doesn't even have Grumble anymore because the decks have been swapped back, so he just has to go for these minions he has in hand now.
And also, so much of Crumple's hand is Volcanoes and Healing Rains and Ultimate Infestations, and just cards that cannot be played, do not do anything. They're going to need a miracle from these random spells from the Hagatha. Maybe a Discover a Battlecry into a Shudderwalk. Maybe that could do it.
It would have to be Grumble and Shudderwalk.
Oh, yeah, they'd have to get 2.
Neither has been played.
Azola's been played, I think.
I don't think so.
Oh, no, maybe not, maybe not.
Not that I recall, at least. But yeah, whatever is going to happen, it's not over for Singapore, but some pretty disgustingly powerful effects are going to have to occur.
That's not one of them.
Yeah, Primal Talisman is not going to get the job done. Yeah, just trying to see what he can make happen here is Crumpled.
You're going to discover what elemental could win him the game.
Well, no, that's a,
that's a draw 2 cards. Never mind.
Yeah, it's just bad. I think we see him reaching for the concede there at some point soon, at least.
No minions left, so no more spells to be generated by Singapore.
Yeah, I was going to say if he could get a Bloodlust, then maybe he'd be able to pull this one back.
Nope.
But I mean, Bulgaria should have the information that there are no minions left. Maybe there was 1 card drawn that could be a minion, but I think they should actually just have pretty much perfect information due to the fact they copied their opponent's hand, that there's just nothing left. If they clear this board, they've won.
Yep, and clear this board they can. They've got Volcanoes, they've got Lightning Storm. Bulgaria have done it, and it shouldn't be a huge surprise. Again, this was the matchup that Singapore said they weren't feeling great about, but Bulgaria will be feeling great now. They are 2-1 in this series as they proudly wave their flag.
And I've got to be honest here, Falk. I was going into this really thinking of Bulgaria as the underdogs, not only in this match, but in the entire tournament. So far, I've been pretty pleasantly surprised. I think there have been some small... the sustainability that you have in Odd Paladin makes such a big difference in that matchup. You can just outvalue them with the use of Vine Cleaver in particular, and also Level Up and Divine Favor to a lesser extent, if you're playing your cards right. Which is an interesting way to say it, because I say by playing your cards
You're not actually playing anything.
You don't play your cards. You just hero power every turn, and that's how you outvalue them. You play your cards right by not playing your cards.
And that's the thing. That's how Spain almost managed to come back in that game earlier. we left the backstage area where we were watching the series and head to the casting area. We looked at the screen and wow, this game is still going on. Yeah, because they just keep smacking that hero power button.
Every single turn, as long as you're not dying too quickly, you have the ability to just take that value, take the time. You have a lot of time because the warrior just doesn't pressure you.
And they did almost win.
They did almost win.
Quite an incredible series to start the HGG finals.
And also, it's worth pointing out, because Silent Storm and Team Bulgaria love putting on a show for us, we love to see this, they have the alternate win condition of Prince Leon in their deck.
Of course.
The 5-mana 5/5 that transforms all your one-cost cards into random legendaries. We could be seeing Deathwing, we could be seeing Rin for Fatigue.
To clarify that, that's only the cards in the deck, though, not the 1-mana cards in the hand.
Oh, yeah, okay, good.
So, if it was the cards in the hand, I actually think Prince Leon would potentially be just an insane card.
How do you get to turn 5 with 1-mana cards in your hand? You're clearly not playing aggressively enough.
You got that hero power.
Fair enough.
It's pretty good hero power, too.
You're right. What I said did go directly against what I was just saying, but any opportunity to make fun of you, I will gladly take. A Silent Storm here. Man, oh man, is this a heavy hand for Odd Paladin. Which is...
not bad, really.
It's not good. Like, you would much rather have the ability to curve out and get some chip damage in at the start. But just having Vine Cleaver, Fungal Mancer, this is constant pressure that Singapore is going to have to find an answer for.
And it begins with the hero powering right on turn 1 with the coin. If Bulgaria can throw Prince Leon early, this is going to be an interesting game of Hearthstone. Random legendaries, Benedictus is a random legendary. Like,
yep.
There's a lot that can happen.
Oh, goodness.
Rin is a random legendary.
Yeah. That would be a cool one. Or even just stuff, just bigger minions, just upping the cost, the mana cost of your deck will really bolster their ability to survive into the late game.
So any... okay, actually, this turn's pretty tough in general because they could just slam the Blessing of Might and start dealing as much damage as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
They could go Purify as Maul. That way, this board just can't be dealt with next turn.
It is really tough because the way I'm mapping it out is I was thinking first glance, Blessing of Might hero power this turn. But then if they clear it, Purify as Maul next turn, maybe with a Blessing of Might as well, leading into a Fungal Mancer doesn't work because they've cleared it off.
Reporting for duty.
Nope, gonna go with the damage instead. Gonna just put as much of this into the face as possible, and it makes sense. You know, none of these cards have been dealt with yet. There is still a reasonable chance that Singapore can't even deal with them now. We might actually have to see Iron Beak Cow played this turn.
And I think if this was 1 mana higher for Kaya's, there was actually the consideration for Silent Storm to hold back the Blessing of Might to make this board appear less threatening.
Right.
Because then they would be less likely to go for Hero Power Reckless Flurry, because you want this board to appear as unthreatening as possible so that you can go Purify as Maul and then Fungal Mancer, because that 1-2 punch that Bulgaria are going to deliver is really, really threatening.
Well, from next turn onwards, Brawl would be able to deal with everything, though as we see, there is still no Brawl present. Bulgaria now have 2 4-1s and a board full of 1-1s with Divine Shields. What can Singapore do about this?
It's going to be incremental removal if they are going to be dealing with this, as, like you pointed out, just the perfect Maul to be found here for Silent Storm, pushing a lot of consistent damage here. They could go for Iron Beak Howl on one of the 4-1s to try and slow it down in combination with the hero power. Ziliax wouldn't even heal them on the turn it's played because Divine Shield, you're not actually dealing any damage to the minion, so the lifesteal doesn't activate. Or they just go Direhorn and hope that that will protect them. But as soon as you get leveled up here, if they have it, it's just, you're over, it's done.
Oh, gonna just have to silence one of these. And this, you said, the Paladin start isn't that aggressive. The Paladin needs to have an aggressive start. Well, they did find a way. Coining out the hero power did the job.
How do you get a starting hand that costs like 23 mana and your opponent's down to half health on turn 5?
Odd Paladin.
Odd Paladin. Well, it's true. That's what the consistency of the hero power affords you.
Yeah.
It matters so much less what cards you draw because you have that every single game, the same plan of spamming that hero power because it does just give you such consistency in every matchup. as they're wondering here, how do we maximize damage whilst also maintaining sustainability on the board? How do we maintain the ability to keep our minions from dying? And trading away the minion without Divine Shield, I think, is the perfect way to go about it.
It's just a stupid amount of pressure. If there's no brawl, Caius cannot do anything about this, and there is no brawl. This is looking to me. This is looking, Derek, but like Bulgaria might actually be about to defeat Singapore, knocking them out of the Hearthstone Global Games.
So what are the options available to Singapore? If we were to see Ziliax healing up to 14 and taking out the Shroom, the Fungal Mancer, sorry, an attack in would bring them up to 17, which would mean 6, 8, 9, not quite lethal, I believe, on the following turn.
What about
with Leroy Jenkins?
silencing the 4-1, tank up shield slam, the 2-2?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Brings them up to 15, though, and that does mean
Leroy is just
that's
lethal.
just going to be closing out the game.
Bulgaria, the underdogs of this series and the whole HGG finals, are taking out Singapore and qualifying through to the decider match. They have done it. Handshakes, high fives. They, look at that, they are thrilled with themselves. But for Singapore, the journey is over. And once again, we get to see the Bulgarian flag being waved, as we have done every single week that they've won throughout the group stages.
Yeah, patriotism really at the heart of Bulgaria's inspiration in this tournament, and a reason they've been doing so well. And again, I just thought they played some good Hearthstone there.
Yeah.
That last game in particular, it was